Welcome to my channel. I am very pleased that you are watching my videos. I share with you the stories that I get into. This story is very unpleasant and very interesting. So, to start, let me just say that my wife and I were supposed to have the time of our lives on this cruise. It was supposed to be a vacation for us to unwind, reconnect, and forget about all the usual stress at home. But looking back, I can see the cracks that were there from the beginning. We'd been married for 6 years, and if I'm being honest, it wasn't perfect. There were small fights here and there, but nothing huge. Or at least that's what I thought. I didn't notice how distant she'd become over the past year. It was like she had a wall up, and every time I tried to knock it down, she just built it higher. On the cruise, we were supposed to enjoy ourselves, but she barely paid attention to me. She spent most of the time on her phone, texting and laughing at whatever she was seeing. Meanwhile, I tried to soak up the sun and enjoy the trip. But one night, something happened that would change everything. I went to the bar to grab a drink, and that's when I met her, the girl who would alter the course of my life. I didn't think much of her at first. She was a bit tipsy, maybe even more than a bit. She seemed friendly enough, maybe a little too friendly, but I didn't think it was anything to be concerned about. I was married, after all. But as the night wore on, I found myself talking to her more. We joked about the ship's bad food, and she laughed loudly, a bit too loudly for my taste. My wife, meanwhile, was off doing her own thing with some people we had met on the cruise. I wasn't worried. I was just, well, bored. And that's when it happened. Out of nowhere, this girl, let's call her Rachel, suddenly reached under the table and grabbed my balls. I swear, I couldn't have reacted faster if she had slapped me across the face. The pain was unbearable. She squeezed so hard, I dropped to the floor, unable to catch my breath. It wasn't a playful grab, either. It was aggressive, almost like she had a personal vendetta against me. I finally managed to get up, and as I was still trying to figure out what had just happened, I asked her, "Why did you do that?" Her response was something I'll never forget. She looked at me, dead in the eyes, and slurred, "You don't deserve to have children." I laughed at first, thinking it was some weird drunken joke. But the more I thought about it, the less funny it seemed. Something about it felt wrong, like it was part of something much bigger. Something that I wasn't quite seeing yet. The next few days after that incident on the cruise were a blur. It didn't help that Rachel kept finding ways to pop up wherever I was. She'd show up at the pool, the bar, or even when I was just taking a walk around the ship. Each time, she'd flash me this smile, like we shared some inside joke that I wasn't even sure I understood. But I tried to brush it off. After all, she was a drunk girl, and I didn't want to cause a scene. But the weird thing was that my wife, Emily, wasn't acting like herself either. She had always been a bit of a social butterfly, but this time, she seemed extra distant. When I tried to make small talk with her, she'd give me short answers, her attention elsewhere. I could feel something was off, but I couldn't quite place it. And honestly, I didn't want to think about it too much because, well, I didn't want to be that guy who overthinks everything. It was the second to last night on the cruise that I got my answer. Emily had been acting especially weird that day. She spent the majority of the afternoon on her phone, even though she knew I was itching to go watch the sunset. We had been planning to take some photos together, but she didn't seem interested. Instead, she kept texting and whispering to whoever was on the other end of her messages. I knew that wasn't normal for her. Emily wasn't the type to be glued to her phone. So, I decided to snoop. Not my proudest moment, but curiosity got the best of me. I waited until she was in the bathroom and grabbed her phone from the side table. At first, I tried to act casual, like I wasn't doing anything wrong, but deep down I knew. I started scrolling through her messages, and that's when I saw something that made my stomach drop. There was a conversation with a guy I didn't recognize. They were flirting back and forth, and I could tell by the tone of their messages that they were close. It wasn't just friendly banter. There were things being said that were personal. Too personal. My heart raced. It wasn't just any guy. It was someone I'd seen around the ship, a tall, good-looking guy, always hanging out with Emily at the bar. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was no coincidence. As I scrolled through the messages, I felt my anger rising. Then, I saw a message from Emily that made my blood boil. She'd written, "I'm so glad we're on this cruise without him. I just need some time to clear my head. I'll be with you soon." I couldn't believe it. She was having an affair right under my nose, and I had no idea. Not only had she been distant, but she had been sneaking around with someone else the entire time. I put the phone back in its place just as Emily walked out of the bathroom. I was trying to act normal, but my heart was pounding in my chest. My mind was racing, replaying everything I had just read. I couldn't believe what I had found. All this time, she had been with someone else, and I had been oblivious. She sat on the edge of the bed, and I could feel the tension in the room. She didn't know I knew yet, but I wasn't going to let it slide. I needed answers, and I needed them now. "Emily," I said, my voice shaky, "who's James?" She froze. Her eyes widened for a split second, but she quickly masked it with a smile. "What are you talking about?" "Don't lie to me," I snapped. "I saw the texts. I saw everything. You're having an affair, aren't you?" Her face shifted from feigned confusion to annoyance, and I could already tell she was about to lie her way out of this. "It's not what you think," she said, crossing her arms defensively. "You're overreacting." I stood there, staring at her, trying to control the rage building inside me. I couldn't believe how casually she was brushing it off. Overreacting? My wife had been having an affair with some guy on this cruise, and she was acting like it was no big deal. Overreacting? I said, barely holding back tears. "You're sleeping with someone else, and I'm supposed to just overreact? How long has this been going on, Emily?" She rolled her eyes, a dismissive smirk forming on her lips. "It's just a fling, okay? It doesn't mean anything." I blinked, completely stunned. She actually had the nerve to downplay it like it was some casual hookup. It felt like a slap in the face. The person I'd loved and trusted for 6 years was looking me in the eyes and telling me it didn't matter. "I don't care if it means something to you or not," I shot back, my voice rising. "You lied to me. You've been lying to me for months." She scoffed. "Oh please. You're always working. You don't have time for me. You haven't even noticed how distant I've been, have you? I've been trying to tell you, but you've been too caught up in your own little world." That hit me like a ton of bricks. I couldn't believe she was blaming me for her affair. As if my long hours at work were some justification for what she had done. "I'm sorry, but what?" I asked, my voice trembling with disbelief. "You're telling me it's my fault that you cheated? Because I'm busy at work? That's your excuse?" She shrugged, looking more frustrated than remorseful. "Maybe if you were more present, I wouldn't have to look for attention elsewhere." I was speechless. I never expected her to turn it around like this, to make it seem like I was the problem. But as much as I hated it, a part of me was still trying to hold on, trying to believe that we could fix this somehow. But the truth was, I knew it was over. I could feel it deep down. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I loved, was gone. I took a deep breath and turned away, needing space to process what had just happened. This was it. The end of the road. After the confrontation, I felt like I was walking through a fog. It wasn't just the betrayal that stung, it was the complete disillusionment. The woman I had loved for years, the woman I thought I knew, was a stranger now. Everything we had built together felt like it was crumbling right before my eyes, and I had no idea how to pick up the pieces. I went to the bar to drown my sorrows. It felt like the only thing I could do to numb the pain. I needed some sort of escape from the crushing weight of what had just happened. But of course, that didn't go as planned. Rachel was there. As if fate were playing some cruel joke on me, she was sitting at the bar, looking at me with that same creepy grin from earlier. She waved me over, and I wanted to turn around and leave, but something kept me rooted to the spot. I didn't sit down at the bar. Instead, I leaned against it, trying to collect myself. Rachel noticed the look on my face. "Hey, You okay? You look like someone just killed your puppy. I just stared at her, not knowing what to say. Honestly, I didn't even know if I could trust myself to speak without completely losing it. Yeah, I muttered, just dealing with some stuff. She took a swig of her drink and leaned closer to me, her breath smelling like cheap rum. You know, Emily's been acting different. She's always with that guy, right? James? I've seen the way they look at each other. The words hit me like a slap to the face. It was like Rachel had read my mind. Of course, Emily and James had been acting weird around each other. I had seen them whispering and laughing in the corners, but I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to believe that my wife, my partner, was capable of that. Rachel didn't give me a chance to respond. She just kept talking. It's obvious, you know. She's not even trying to hide it. I'm surprised you haven't noticed. Or maybe you did notice and just didn't want to face it. I felt the rage building up again, but this time, it was more than just anger. It was desperation. Why was Rachel telling me this? Was she trying to make me feel worse? I didn't know, but I wasn't ready to find out. I excused myself quickly, ignoring the pit in my stomach as I made my way back to our cabin. I needed to talk to Emily again. I needed more answers. But this time, I wasn't going to let her turn things around on me. I needed to know the truth. I needed her to admit what she had done and stop playing these stupid games. When I got back, Emily was sitting on the bed, scrolling through her phone. She didn't even look up when I entered, as if she was too absorbed in whatever nonsense she was reading. I stood there, trying to steady my breathing. Emily, we need to talk. Now. She glanced up lazily, her eyes narrowing. What now? I could feel the anger boiling beneath the surface, but I wasn't going to let her see it. Not yet. I was determined to keep it together. I know about you and James. I know what's been going on. Her face immediately dropped, and for a split second, I saw something that looked like guilt in her eyes. But just as quickly, she recovered, putting on that same smug, detached expression. Yeah, well, what do you expect me to say? She snapped. You're acting like it's the end of the world, but we've been miserable for months, haven't we? You don't even look at me anymore, and I can't keep pretending everything is fine. I clenched my fists. I was done listening to her excuses. So this is how you fix it? You just go and sleep with someone else? She stood up now, her voice rising. You don't get it. I needed someone to care about me. You're so wrapped up in your own life, you don't even notice when your wife is falling apart. I couldn't take it anymore. And you think sleeping with some guy on a cruise is going to fix everything? That's your solution? She didn't answer. Instead, she turned away from me, like she couldn't even be bothered to deal with this anymore. And in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't the problem. I wasn't the one who broke this relationship. She had already checked out, and I had been too blind to see it. And now, as the full weight of what had happened sank in, I knew I couldn't fix it. I couldn't fix her. The days that followed were a blur of tense silences, forced pleasantries, and awkward encounters. Every time I looked at Emily, I couldn't shake the image of her and James, laughing together behind my back. I couldn't unsee the messages, the lies. The woman I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. She was still physically there, sitting next to me at dinner or walking beside me on the deck, but emotionally, she had checked out a long time ago. I spent a lot of time in my own head, trying to make sense of everything. I kept asking myself, how could she do this to me? We had built a life together, and now it felt like it was all falling apart in the span of a few days. But there was another question that kept gnawing at me: why did I let it go on for so long? I realized then that the cracks had been there for a while. The distance, the coldness in her voice when we spoke, the way she started going out more often without me, it wasn't just some sudden shift. Looking back, it was like I had been blind to the warning signs. Maybe I had been so consumed with my own work and responsibilities that I didn't notice how much we were drifting apart. I knew that I needed to make a decision. I couldn't keep living in this state of limbo, stuck between denial and anger. I needed to move forward, one way or another. So, I decided to confront her once more, not to get an apology or some kind of closure, because I knew that wasn't coming, but to figure out what came next. It was late one night, after we had returned to our cabin from another awkward dinner with the group, that I turned to her. I had spent the whole evening thinking about what I wanted to say. "Emily," I began, my voice calm but firm, "I can't keep doing this." She looked up from her phone, her expression blank. "What do you mean?" "You and me," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady, "this isn't working. I don't know what's going on between you and James, but it's clear that you don't care about this marriage anymore. And I can't keep pretending that things are fine when they're not." She sighed dramatically, rolling her eyes as if I were the one being difficult. "We've been through this already. I told you, I needed space, and I found someone who actually gives a damn about me." My stomach dropped. The words were so matter-of-fact, so devoid of any empathy, that it almost felt like she was talking about a friend and not her own husband. "So, you've already made your choice, then?" I asked, trying to hold back the tears. "You're just going to throw everything away?" She gave me a look like I was the one being unreasonable. "You don't get it, do you? I've been trying to make this work for so long. You don't see me anymore. All I wanted was to feel wanted, to feel like I mattered, and you've been too busy to even notice." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The audacity of it all, the way she was spinning it. I wasn't perfect, but I had tried to be there, tried to make her happy. And yet, she was acting like I was the one who had neglected her. I took a deep breath and made a decision. It wasn't about winning her back or proving anything to her. It was about me, about my dignity and my sanity. I couldn't keep fighting for something that was already over. "I'm done, Emily," I said, my voice a little steadier than I felt. "I can't keep doing this. I'm not going to keep begging for your attention or your love. I deserve better than this." I could see the flicker of something in her eyes, but it wasn't remorse, it was annoyance, maybe even contempt. It wasn't the reaction I had hoped for, but it was the one I needed to hear. She had already checked out of this relationship long ago, and now I was finally doing the same. "Fine," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Do whatever you want. It's not like I care anymore." I didn't respond. I just turned and walked out of the cabin, feeling like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I wasn't sure where I was going or what I was going to do next, but I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't going to let this define me. I wasn't going to let her actions break me. After that conversation, it felt like my life shifted into a new phase. I wasn't just angry anymore, I was beyond that. I had entered a strange kind of numbness, a calmness that came from finally accepting the reality of what Emily had done. But the aftermath was a different story. We didn't speak much after the confrontation. Emily busied herself with her phone and tried to stay out of my way, while I spent most of my time trying to process everything. I began to feel like a stranger in my own life. The cruise ship that had once been full of excitement and promise now felt like a prison. I didn't know where to go or what to do. Emily and I were like two people on different planets, coexisting in the same space but not sharing a single moment of connection. The worst part was the guilt. Despite everything Emily had done, I still couldn't shake the feeling that I had failed somehow. I kept replaying every moment of our marriage in my head, asking myself where I went wrong, what I could have done differently. It was as if I was looking for something, some hidden clue or missed sign, that would make everything make sense. I needed an escape, so I spent a lot of time on the deck, staring out at the endless expanse of water. It was so quiet there, just the sound of the waves crashing against the ship. And in that quiet, I could almost hear my own thoughts again. I remember one night, as the stars glittered in the sky, I found myself talking to one of the crew members. His name was Tony, and we'd had a couple of casual conversations over the last few days. He could tell something was off, and after a few drinks, I finally let my guard down. "I don't know, man," I confessed, leaning back against the railing, staring out at the ocean. "I thought I had it all figured out. Thought I knew what love was. But now it feels like I've been living a lie." Tony listened quietly, not offering any advice, just letting me vent. He told me he had seen his fair share of broken marriages, and sometimes, the best thing you could do was cut your losses and move on. But I wasn't sure I was ready for that yet. I wasn't ready to admit that my marriage was over. The next morning, after a long night of thinking, I made up my mind. I couldn't go back to what we had. I needed to end it once and for all. I wasn't going to keep playing this game of pretending everything was okay when it clearly wasn't. I needed a clean break, for my own mental health and sanity. When I walked into the cabin that day, I found Emily sitting on the bed, staring at her phone again, lost in whatever world she had retreated to. "Emily, I'm leaving," I said, my voice firm and final. "I'm done with this. I can't keep living like this, and I'm not going to sit here pretending everything is fine when I know it's not." She looked up at me, her face a mix of disbelief and annoyance. "What? You're just leaving? After everything, you're just going to walk away?" I nodded. "Yes. You made your choice when you decided to cheat on me. You checked out a long time ago, and I'm not going to keep fighting for something that's already dead." She didn't say anything for a moment. She just stared at me with that cold, detached expression. It was like she had already moved on, and I was just a nuisance standing in her way. "You really think I care that much?" she scoffed. "I've been over this for months. You don't deserve me." Her words stung, but they also made me realize something. She wasn't the same person I had fallen in love with. She was a version of herself I didn't recognize, a person who had justified her actions and stopped caring about the relationship entirely. "I may not deserve you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "but I deserve better than this." And with that, I walked out. There were no tears, no dramatic goodbyes, just the quiet certainty that I was making the right decision. I don't know what Emily thought at that moment. Maybe she was relieved. Maybe she was angry. But it didn't matter anymore. The only thing that mattered was that I was moving forward, and I was done waiting for her to change. I wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was finally taking control of my own life again. Leaving Emily behind on that cruise ship was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made. But as I walked off the ship and back into the world I had been avoiding for months, there was a sense of relief. It felt like I was waking up from a bad dream, realizing that I had been living someone else's version of reality. I had spent too long holding onto a relationship that no longer existed, and now it was time to step into something new, something that was about me. I didn't know exactly what moving forward would look like. Hell, I wasn't even sure I wanted to get back into the dating scene. At that moment, all I could think about was finding peace, finding myself again. I needed time to heal, to rediscover who I was outside of the confines of a failing marriage. The first few days after I left Emily were strangely peaceful. I went back to my apartment, took a deep breath, and started living again. It wasn't glamorous or exciting, but it felt honest. No more pretending to be happy when I wasn't. No more going through the motions. I could finally breathe without feeling suffocated. It was the little things that started to make a difference. I found joy in doing things for myself, cooking meals, taking walks in the park, listening to music without anyone criticizing my playlist. I started reconnecting with friends I hadn't seen in months because I had been too wrapped up in Emily's drama. And the best part? I could finally look in the mirror and not feel like I was lying to myself anymore. But then came the tough moments. The quiet nights when I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, remembering the good times, before everything had fallen apart. It wasn't that I missed Emily, it was more about missing the life we had once shared. I had to come to terms with the fact that I had loved a version of her that no longer existed. The woman who cheated, who lied, who took me for granted wasn't the woman I had married. That version of Emily was gone, and it took me a while to stop grieving the memory of her. Eventually, the loneliness hit. It wasn't overwhelming, but there were moments when I wished for someone to talk to, someone who would understand the emotional mess I was sorting through. I turned to therapy, which, honestly, was a game changer. Talking to someone who wasn't emotionally involved helped me untangle the knots in my heart. It allowed me to confront the emotional baggage I had been carrying for years, before Emily, and especially during the last months of our relationship. I began to understand that I wasn't the only one at fault here. Emily had her part to play, but I had also stayed silent when I should have spoken up, ignored my own needs when I should have fought for them. The decision to end things wasn't just about Emily anymore, it was about reclaiming my life. I wasn't going to spend the rest of my days lamenting over a lost marriage or holding on to a past that didn't serve me. I was moving forward. It was time for a new chapter. One afternoon, I ran into one of Emily's friends, Sarah, at a cafe. Sarah was always nice to me, and I was surprised to see her there. We exchanged pleasantries before she hesitated, clearly unsure how to address the elephant in the room. "How are you doing?" she asked softly, a bit awkwardly. "I'm good," I said, shrugging. "Better, actually." She nodded, but I could tell she was uncomfortable. "I heard about you and Emily. I'm really sorry, you know." "Yeah, me too," I replied, forcing a smile. "It's been rough, but I'm doing okay. It's honestly been a long time coming." She stared at me for a long time, like she was deciding whether to say something else. Then she let out a breath. "I'm just gonna be honest with you," she said. "I knew about Emily and James. We all did. But Emily didn't want anyone to know because she didn't want to hurt you." I blinked in disbelief. "You knew?" "Yeah. I'm sorry. She was my friend, but I couldn't keep lying to you about it. You deserved to know the truth." I didn't know how to respond. Part of me felt betrayed by everyone, by Sarah, by Emily's other friends, by the world itself. But another part of me felt strangely relieved. It was like I was finally getting a glimpse of the bigger picture, the part of the story I had never been told. "Thank you for telling me," I said, my voice a little hoarse. I think I needed to hear that." She nodded, then changed the subject, but we continued to talk for a while, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was making progress. I was understanding my own story better, and I was starting to rebuild it from scratch. I wasn't sure what would come next, whether I'd ever date again, whether I'd ever trust someone the way I trusted Emily, but I was beginning to see that I didn't need to have all the answers right now. What mattered was that I was finally free. In the end, I realized that the hardest part wasn't losing Emily, it was letting go of the fantasy of what I thought we could be. Once I let that go, everything else started to fall into place. As the weeks passed, I started to see the full picture of what my life had become. I thought I would be angry and bitter forever, but something shifted in me. It wasn't a dramatic epiphany or a single moment of clarity, it was more like peeling off layers of dead skin and letting myself breathe again. I didn't need to constantly revisit the past to move forward. I had the power to make a new life for myself. But the healing process wasn't linear. It wasn't all smooth sailing. There were still days when I woke up feeling like I was wearing a cloak of sadness, weighed down by the lingering remnants of Emily's betrayal. I still found myself questioning my self-worth, wondering if there was something fundamentally wrong with me for her to have treated me that way. I spent hours thinking about what went wrong. The ship. The pain. The absurdity of everything. I kept thinking about that moment when Emily casually mentioned that she didn't deserve me, how she still justified everything she'd done. It was such a strange, confusing blend of hurt and anger. But in those quiet moments of introspection, I learned something vital: Emily's actions were her responsibility, not mine. It was a tough pill to swallow, but I finally started accepting that no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't change her or the way she had treated me. And it wasn't my job to carry the weight of her mistakes. My job was to take care of myself. I began prioritizing self-care in ways I never had before. I worked out more, something I had always enjoyed but had neglected during the relationship. I spent more time with my family, people who loved me and respected me. I dove into new hobbies and even took a weekend trip to the mountains to clear my head. And then came the tough realization that the life I had known with Emily was gone. And in its place was a blank canvas. A new beginning. I won't lie, it was terrifying. I had no idea what I wanted anymore. I didn't know what kind of person I was outside of a marriage. I didn't know if I would ever be capable of loving someone again. And the thought of being vulnerable with another person felt like a distant dream, a foreign concept that was just too risky. But I also knew I wasn't going to let fear keep me from living my life. I couldn't allow the actions of one person to dictate the rest of my existence. Slowly, I started dipping my toes into the world of dating again. At first, it was awkward, hell, it still is sometimes, but I forced myself to try, to at least be open to the possibility that love could be part of my future, even if it wasn't the same as it was before. One evening, a few months after everything had calmed down, I found myself at a bar with a few old friends. One of them was Emma, a woman I'd known since high school. We hadn't kept in touch much over the years, but I was happy to see her. She was warm, funny, and easy to talk to. We sat for hours, chatting about old times, about where our lives had taken us. It was comfortable, with no pressure to be anything we weren't. By the end of the night, we exchanged numbers, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. I didn't jump into a relationship with Emma, but I started allowing myself the chance to connect with people again. The idea of intimacy no longer felt as scary as it had. With each step forward, I realized that maybe, just maybe, there was someone out there who would appreciate me for who I was, flaws and all. But even more importantly, I realized I could appreciate myself. That was the most powerful lesson I'd learned throughout this entire ordeal: I am enough. As the months passed, I reflected on the choices I had made and how far I had come. The emotional toll of Emily's betrayal was still there, but I had learned how to carry it without letting it define me. I had learned to forgive myself for staying longer than I should have, for ignoring my own needs, for being so blindly loyal to someone who didn't deserve it. But most of all, I had learned how to stand on my own, to trust that I was capable of rebuilding my life, one small piece at a time. The end of my marriage had been the hardest thing I'd ever faced, but it was also the beginning of a new chapter. And with that new chapter came the chance to redefine what happiness looked like for me. It wasn't easy. But it was worth it. And if there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's this: sometimes, you have to let go of something that's broken in order to create something new. And you don't have to do it alone. Months after my separation from Emily, I had learned how to function as a single person again. But that didn't mean I was completely free of the emotional aftermath of everything that had happened. Emily and I still had some lingering matters to address, especially when it came to the legal side of things, the divorce papers, splitting assets, and finally closing the door on the life we had once shared. I hadn't heard from Emily much since the day I walked off the cruise ship. The only time she reached out was through a few passive-aggressive texts, but I had learned to ignore them. She would text something like, "I hope you're happy now," followed by an emoji that seemed to say everything without saying a word. I had come to realize that she wasn't looking for closure, she was looking for control. The same way she had manipulated me into believing I was the problem in the first place. One evening, about 6 months after we split, I received a call from Emily. I had been expecting it at some point, but that didn't make it any easier. She sounded different on the phone, more desperate, maybe even a little broken. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice soft, almost pleading. I had been preparing myself for this moment, but when it finally came, I didn't know how to respond. Part of me felt like I was being sucked back into a storm I'd just learned how to weather. But another part of me, the part that was still healing, felt a twinge of curiosity. Maybe she wanted to apologize, maybe this was her chance to acknowledge the hurt she had caused. But I didn't trust her enough to hope for that. "What's it about?" I asked cautiously. I want to talk about us. About what happened." "I don't know, maybe I can explain," she said. I had to admit, the thought of getting answers was tempting. But I wasn't sure if I could stomach it, especially if the conversation was just going to be another round of lies. I took a deep breath before replying. "Fine. We can talk. But just so we're clear, this conversation doesn't change anything. I'm not going back to you. I'm not going to forgive you for what you did. But we can talk." I don't know why I agreed to meet her, maybe because I needed to hear it from her mouth. Maybe I needed to see if there was any part of Emily left that could take responsibility for what she had done. We met at a cafe, a neutral place where we could talk without any distractions. She was sitting at a table when I walked in, her back straight, wearing an expression that was both apologetic and guarded. She looked different, but in the same way people look when they're trying to rebuild themselves after a crisis, haggard, trying to put on a mask of strength that didn't quite fit. I sat down across from her and waited for her to speak. "First of all, I'm sorry," she started. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I owe you an apology. For everything." I nodded slowly, watching her, unsure of what to feel. Part of me wanted to hear the words, needed to hear them, but another part of me wasn't ready to trust them. I had heard so many versions of the truth from her over the years that I didn't know what to believe anymore. "You never took responsibility for what happened. You always blamed me," I said quietly. "And I want you to understand that what you did, the affair, the lies, the cruelty, it wasn't just a mistake. It was intentional. You chose to hurt me." She looked down, her fingers fiddling with the edge of her coffee cup. I could see her fighting back tears, but I didn't feel sorry for her anymore. She had cried too many fake tears in the past. I didn't know how to handle it. The relationship was falling apart before the cruise, but I didn't want to face it. So I did what I thought I had to do to feel better. "I know that doesn't make sense, but I was lost, and I made horrible decisions," she said, her voice trembling. I had to fight not to roll my eyes. She was still spinning it, still trying to make it sound like it was all about her confusion, her pain. She wasn't talking about how she used me, how she manipulated my trust, or how she completely destroyed everything we had. "Maybe it's too late for you to understand what you did to me, Emily," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But you broke me. You broke me, and you never once apologized for it until now. And even then, I don't think it's about me anymore. It's about you not being able to live with the guilt. That's not an apology. That's a self-serving justification." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't care. I wasn't the one who had hurt her, I wasn't the one who had lied and cheated and manipulated everything we had. I had been the one who had loved her with everything I had, and she had thrown it all away for some fleeting affair. "I just want you to know that I'm sorry for hurting you," she repeated, her voice quieter now. "I know I can't change the past, but I want you to heal. I want you to move on." There it was. The truth I had been waiting for. She wasn't sorry for what she had done to me, she was sorry for what it had done to her. And that made everything click. It was never about me. It was always about her, her needs, her selfishness. "Emily, you don't get to decide how I heal. You don't get to decide how I move on," I said, standing up. "And I'm done with this conversation. I'm done with you." I didn't wait for her to say anything else. I walked out of that cafe with my heart still heavy but with a clearer sense of closure than I had ever had before. The chapter of my life with Emily was over. She could apologize all she wanted, but the truth was, she would never be the person I needed her to be. And that was a reality I had to accept. The weeks after that final confrontation were some of the hardest yet. Emily's apology, no matter how hollow, had planted a seed of doubt in my mind. There were moments when I wondered if I had made the right choice in walking away. The pain of losing the life we'd built together still lingered, but it was starting to dull. I had built a life around her, around us. And now that it was gone, I had to reconstruct everything from scratch. For the first time in a long time, I found myself alone. The reality of it hit harder than I expected. Sure, I had my family and friends, and I'd managed to get out of the emotional quicksand I'd been stuck in for so long, but there was still that gnawing emptiness. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to face it head-on, or it would drag me back into the same cycle of self-doubt and insecurity. I decided to throw myself into work. I immersed myself in projects I'd neglected during my marriage, picking up hobbies I used to love but had abandoned. At first, it felt like I was just going through the motions. But gradually, it became more than just filling the void. It became my path to self-discovery. I started seeing a therapist, something I had always been hesitant to do but was now open to. There were a lot of things I needed to unpack, things about my relationship with Emily, things about myself that I hadn't acknowledged. It wasn't easy to open up to someone, especially a stranger, but I found the process to be incredibly liberating. I learned how to reframe my thinking, how to see myself as a person who was worthy of love, not just someone who had been wronged. In therapy, I also came to a painful but important realization: I had been complicit in letting Emily treat me the way she had. Not that I deserved it, but I had ignored the red flags. I had been so blinded by the idea of us, of the life we could have together, that I missed the signs that I was being taken for granted. It wasn't just her fault, it was mine too. I had allowed her behavior to become my reality because I was too afraid of facing the truth. It was humbling. But it also felt empowering, like I was taking back control of my own story. The hardest part, though, was letting go of the anger. I spent so much time hating her for what she had done to me, for how she had shattered my trust. And I realized that as long as I held on to that anger, I was giving her the power to control me. She was already gone, and yet, in my mind, she was still holding me captive. One evening, as I sat alone in my apartment, sipping a glass of whiskey and reflecting on everything, I made a decision. I was going to forgive her, not for her, but for me. Not because she deserved it, but because I deserved peace. I didn't need to carry that anger with me anymore. Forgiveness wasn't something I could rush. It didn't mean I would forget, but it meant I could let go. I could stop letting her dictate the narrative of my life. It was my life now, and I was ready to take it back. But forgiveness didn't mean I was ready to jump back into another relationship. Not yet. I wasn't healed enough for that. I needed to continue working on myself, to continue rebuilding who I was outside of my marriage. At the same time, I realized that I wasn't afraid of love anymore. The thought of being with someone again didn't terrify me the way it used to. I had learned that I was worthy of real love, love that was built on trust and respect, not manipulation and lies. And maybe one day, I would find it. But for now, I was content with where I was. I had reclaimed my life, my independence, and most importantly, my peace of mind. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Every day, I worked on becoming the person I had always wanted to be. Strong. Independent. Vulnerable, but only in ways that were healthy. I wasn't perfect, and I didn't need to be. I had made mistakes, but I was no longer defined by them. I was moving forward. Life, it seemed, had a funny way of throwing curveballs just when you thought things were settling into place. I had been living my routine for months now: therapy sessions, hanging out with friends, focusing on my career, and staying away from relationships. I had told myself I wasn't ready, that I needed more time to heal, to focus on the lessons I had learned from my marriage with Emily. But life, as usual, had other plans. It happened when I least expected it. I was at a conference for work, nothing too exciting, just a standard networking event. I wasn't looking for anything special, just hoping to make some good connections and get back to my routine. But then I saw her. She was standing by the bar, talking animatedly to a few colleagues. Her laugh was familiar, though I couldn't immediately place it. I did a double take, my brain slowly catching up. Her hair was shorter now, more refined, and she had an elegance about her that caught my attention. It was Sarah. Yes, that's Sarah. The one person who had been a close friend of Emily's before everything fell apart. She had been the one who always seemed to subtly back Emily up during our rocky moments. She was always nice to me, but I had never thought much of her beyond that she was just one of Emily's friends. Now, standing there in front of me, it was like the past came rushing back, but with a twist. She saw me too, her eyes widening in recognition. For a second, it seemed like we were both stuck in some kind of awkward standoff, trying to process the surprise of seeing each other in this unfamiliar setting. "Hey," she said, breaking the silence first. Her smile was warm but cautious, like she didn't quite know what to say. "It's been a while." I had to admit, I was surprised to see her. Sarah had been such a consistent part of my life when Emily and I were together, and now, here she was, a reminder of that past. "Yeah," I said, keeping my tone even. "It has." We stood there for a moment, the silence stretching longer than either of us seemed comfortable with. I wasn't sure what to expect from this encounter. Was she just going to be friendly? Was there something more? I had no real reason to trust her after everything that had happened, and yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something different about this. "I heard about the divorce," she said softly, her eyes momentarily avoiding mine. "I'm really sorry, that must have been tough." I could tell she was trying to be sincere, but I had to wonder, was she being genuine? Or was she simply following the polite social script? I wasn't sure what her intentions were, but I had learned to trust my gut. "It was," I replied, keeping it brief. "But it's been a while. I'm moving on now." There was an uncomfortable pause, but then Sarah surprised me by taking a step closer. "I never thought you deserved what happened," she said, her voice low, almost conspiratorial. "Emily. She didn't tell you everything." My heart skipped a beat. The way she said that, the way she looked at me, it was like she was about to drop some kind of bombshell. For a split second, I felt a surge of hope, a desperate need to know the truth about the things I still didn't understand. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Sarah hesitated, then leaned in a little closer. "Emily wasn't just cheating on you with that guy from the cruise," she whispered. "There were others, too. She'd been seeing someone else for a while before all that, and it wasn't just about the affair, it was about control. She wanted to keep you hooked, keep you on a leash while she did whatever she wanted. She lied about a lot of things, things I couldn't be a part of." I was stunned. My mind reeled as the pieces began to fall into place. Emily's behavior, her manipulation, her gaslighting. It all made sense now. But hearing it from Sarah, someone who had been on the periphery of our relationship, someone who had known about the lies, it hit differently. "I never wanted to be a part of that," Sarah continued, looking down at her hands, clearly uncomfortable. "But I had no idea how to tell you. I just thought it was her business. But after everything happened, I couldn't stay quiet anymore. You deserve to know what really happened." I stood there, my chest tightening. I wanted to yell, to scream at the unfairness of it all. My mind flashed back to the countless nights I had spent trying to figure out what went wrong, trying to put the pieces together. All along, I had blamed myself. I had thought I was the one who had missed something, that I had somehow failed Emily. But now it felt like I had been blindsided by a series of lies, a web of deceit that I had never been aware of. I don't know what to say," I managed. "I trusted her. And I didn't deserve any of it." Sarah nodded, her eyes soft with sympathy. "No, you didn't. You didn't deserve any of it. And I'm sorry for not speaking up sooner. But you deserve better than what she did to you." For the first time in a long time, I felt a small flicker of relief. It wasn't much, but it was something. It was the truth, something I had desperately needed. The validation that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't imagining things, that Emily had been the one to destroy our relationship, not me. But there was still a lingering question in my mind, one that I wasn't sure I wanted the answer to. Why had Sarah waited so long to tell me this? Why now, of all times? It didn't feel like an innocent conversation, it felt like a piece of unfinished business, a new complication in a life that had only just begun to feel like it was healing. "I appreciate you telling me," I said finally, trying to steady my emotions. "But why are you telling me this now?" Sarah paused, then looked me in the eyes. "Because I think you deserve to know the truth, and maybe it's time for both of us to move on." I didn't know what to say to that. I didn't know what moving on meant for her or for me, but I knew one thing for sure, my life had just been shaken up again. And whatever came next, I wasn't sure I was ready for it. That night, I couldn't shake what Sarah had said. Her words echoed in my mind, bouncing off the walls of my apartment as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. I had finally come to terms with the fact that Emily's betrayal was far worse than I had initially believed. I had thought the affair on the cruise ship was the worst part of it, but now, hearing about the other men, the lies, the manipulation, it was like the ground had been pulled out from under me again. It wasn't just that Emily had cheated, it was the depth of the deception, the emotional games she had played. She hadn't just been unfaithful in the physical sense, but mentally and emotionally as well. The realization was suffocating, and the worst part was, I couldn't even process it. The flood of emotions, anger, betrayal, disbelief, was too overwhelming to even make sense of. And then there was Sarah. I couldn't quite place my feelings about her yet. Part of me was grateful for what she had told me, for shedding light on the truth that had been hidden from me for so long. But another part of me wondered what her motives were. Was she just trying to make herself feel better for staying quiet all this time? Or was there something more to it? The way she had looked at me, the softness in her eyes, it felt like she was trying to connect, maybe even offering some kind of reassurance. I wasn't sure what to do with that. The next day, I tried to push all the thoughts aside. I went through my routine, going to work, meeting with clients, and checking in with friends. But the more I went through the motions, the more the confusion gnawed at me. I couldn't focus. I couldn't shake the feeling that everything I had thought was solid, the trust one had placed in my marriage, the belief that I knew who Emily was, had been built on a foundation of lies. During lunch, I caught myself texting Sarah. I don't know what made me do it. I didn't expect her to reply. But when my phone buzzed with her response, I found myself staring at it for far too long. I hope you're doing okay. I didn't mean to overwhelm you. I just wanted you to know the truth, even if it's late. I sat there for a minute, thinking about how to respond. I wasn't ready to forgive her for waiting so long to tell me the truth, but I also didn't want to shut her down completely. She had opened a door I wasn't sure I was ready to walk through. But curiosity, as it often does, got the better of me. It's a lot to take in, I typed, my fingers hesitant. I appreciate you telling me, but I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do with this. Why now? The response came back quickly, almost as if she had been waiting for me to ask. I know I should have said something earlier. But when it happened, I wasn't sure if it was my place. I thought I was just being a friend to Emily. But seeing how everything turned out, I felt like I couldn't stay silent anymore. Her answer wasn't exactly clear, but it was enough to keep me wondering. There was still that lingering question, why now? Why had she chosen to tell me all this after everything had already fallen apart? Part of me wondered if she had been carrying some guilt, or if she had been waiting for me to ask. Maybe, in some strange way, she was trying to make up for the role she had played, even if it had been indirect. The more I thought about it, the more questions popped into my head. Was Sarah trying to get close to me? Was this some kind of twisted way of making amends? Or was she just genuinely trying to help me see the truth? It was hard to know for sure. All I knew was that, for whatever reason, she was now part of this mess. And her role in all of it was far more significant than I had initially thought. I didn't know where to go from here. I had just gotten out of a toxic marriage, and now I was facing the reality that some of the people who had been closest to me had known more than they had let on. It felt like every relationship I had built was shaky, like the ground beneath me had eroded, leaving me wondering who I could trust. The confusion was suffocating. I thought I had moved on, thought I was over the worst of it. But now, with Sarah's revelations, everything seemed to be coming back to the surface, making it harder to move forward. For the rest of the day, I tried to focus on my work, but my mind kept wandering back to Sarah's message. I had so many unanswered questions, and every time I tried to push them away, they came rushing back. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I had a choice to make. I could either keep digging into this new revelation and see where it led, or I could close the door on it completely. But could I really do that? Could I just let it go and pretend like it didn't matter? I wasn't sure. That evening, I sat in my apartment, staring at the half-empty glass of whiskey in front of me. The amber liquid swirled in the glass as I thought about the past, about Emily, about everything I had been through. I was no longer the man I had been when we first met. That guy, the one who believed in love, in loyalty, in the idea that marriage was a partnership, had been erased, crushed under the weight of betrayal. I looked at my phone again, checking if Sarah had texted me back. It was almost like a reflex now. The more I thought about her, the more I realized she wasn't just a messenger of truth. She was a part of this twisted web, and her presence in my life wasn't something I could easily dismiss. The truth she had shared with me, her admission that Emily had lied, cheated, and manipulated me for so long, it left me with more questions than answers. I didn't know what to do with the new information. part of me wanted to confront Emily, drag her back into the mess, make her face the consequences of her actions. But another part of me, the part that had been trying so hard to move on, told me to let it go. To cut my losses and leave the past behind. But could I really just walk away without understanding the full extent of the betrayal? Could I ever trust anyone again if I didn't get all the answers? The problem was, every time I thought about Emily, I remembered the good moments too. The laughter. The trips. The late-night conversations. The way we used to joke about growing old together. It wasn't just the affair that had destroyed our marriage, it was the loss of everything I had believed in. The sense of security, the feeling of being loved and wanted. That had been ripped away, and now, all I had were fragments. As I poured another drink, my mind shifted to a memory from before everything fell apart. I remembered the cruise, the night things had started to unravel. It felt like a lifetime ago, but the memory was so vivid, so clear. I had been excited for the trip, thinking it was a fresh start for us. Emily and I had been in a good place, or so I thought. But I now saw it differently. The way she had kept her distance, the way she had been so secretive with her phone, things I had brushed off at the time now seemed like signs of something bigger. I had ignored the red flags, believing the best in her. And then there was the night with the drunken girl. That moment had been burned into my memory, more than I had cared to admit. When she grabbed me, squeezed me so hard that I fell to the floor in pain, the shock had been instant. I had looked up at her, dazed, asking, "Why did you do that?" Her response still echoed in my mind, "You don't deserve to have children." I still couldn't make sense of it. What did that even mean? Why had she said that? And why did it feel so personal, like she was speaking on behalf of someone else? It had never been just a random act, there had been something beneath it. But in that moment, I had been too confused by the pain to dig deeper. Now, with the information Sarah had given me, I began to wonder if that girl's words had been part of something bigger. Was she somehow connected to Emily's betrayal? Had Emily, in her twisted way, sent her to do that? Or was it all just a bizarre coincidence? The thought made my stomach turn. I had trusted Emily completely, and now, it felt like everything around me had been a lie. I had never been one to doubt people, especially not someone I had spent years with, but now, I didn't know who to trust. I looked at my phone again. There was still no new message from Sarah. I couldn't stop thinking about how she had been part of Emily's circle, how she had known all along and done nothing. Was she trying to play some kind of savior role now, stepping in to tell me the truth after the fact? Or was she simply trying to absolve herself of her own guilt for not speaking up sooner? I typed a message to Sarah, "I don't know what you expect from me, but I'm not ready for this. I need some time." I hesitated before sending it. Would it come across as too harsh? Would she think I was angry? I wasn't angry with her, not exactly. But I was angry with the situation, with the way everything had played out. She had been part of my life for so long, but now I couldn't tell if she was someone I could rely on or just another person who had failed me. The message sent, and I put the phone down, not expecting a reply immediately. As I sat there in the silence, I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. I didn't know how to feel anymore. I was exhausted from thinking about the past, from trying to piece together a life that had been shattered by betrayal. I wanted to move on, to walk away from everything that had hurt me. But the truth was, I didn't know how. The next step was unclear, and I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that I wasn't done confronting the ghosts of my past just yet. The truth had come crashing into my life, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to face the rest of it. But I knew one thing for sure, nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning, I woke up with a heavy feeling in my chest. It was like the weight of everything had intensified overnight, crushing me as I tried to sleep. I hadn't slept much, to be honest. My mind kept running through the events over and over again, each moment more painful than the last. The fact that Emily's betrayal had been so deep, so extensive, made it all feel like a nightmare that wouldn't end. I had tried to distract myself the previous night, pouring another drink, sending a message to Sarah, and then doing the only thing I knew how to do, shut my feelings down. But now, in the morning, they all came rushing back. I glanced at my phone again. No message from Sarah yet. I had expected her to give me some space after I told her I wasn't ready, but there was still that lingering feeling that I needed answers. And not just from her, from Emily, from everyone involved. I had to face the hardest question of all: what was I going to do about Emily? Was I ready to confront her? Was I ready to hear her lies again, her excuses, her manipulations? I wasn't sure. I didn't know if I was prepared to go back down that road with her. A part of me wanted to confront her and demand the truth, everything, no half measures. But another part of me wondered if it was even worth it. The marriage was already shattered, and the lies had already piled up. What could she say that would change anything? But still, the anger inside me burned. I wasn't the kind of person who let things slide. I wasn't someone who could just forget the pain, the humiliation. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I had two choices. I could either continue to let her control the narrative in my mind, or I could take control of it. Confronting her would be taking control. But would it really help? Would it bring me peace, or just more pain? I didn't have the answer, but I knew I needed to make a decision. I took a deep breath, picked up my phone, and dialed Emily's number. It rang for what felt like forever, each tone sending a jolt of anxiety through me. I didn't even know what I was going to say once she picked up. The words felt stuck in my throat. Finally, she answered. "Hello?" Her voice was soft, almost too casual. Too normal. "Emily," I said, my voice steady but cold. "We need to talk." There was a pause on the other end. I could practically hear her swallowing, the realization setting in that something was about to change. "About what?" she asked, her tone a little defensive. I clenched my jaw, taking a moment before answering. "About everything. About the affair. About the lies. About everything you've been hiding from me." Her voice dropped, and I could hear the panic in it now. "I don't know what you mean," she said quickly. "What's this about?" I felt my blood start to boil. The lies were starting already. "You know exactly what I mean, Emily. I know about the men. I know about the cruise. I know about all of it." For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then she spoke again, this time with more force. "You don't know anything. What are you talking about?" I could hear her trying to maintain control, trying to downplay the situation, but I wasn't going to let her off easy. "Stop lying to me. Sarah told me everything." That got her attention. I could hear her take a sharp breath, and then she said, "Sarah? What did she tell you?" I couldn't help but feel a small, bitter laugh rise in my chest. "She told me the truth. That you've been cheating on me for a while. That you lied to me over and over again. That you were never really the person I thought you were." There was another pause. It felt like she was scrambling for something, some way to save face. But there was nothing left to save. The facade had crumbled. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she finally said, her voice shaking a little. It just happened, okay? It's not what you think." I could feel my patience wearing thin. "How is it not what I think? You've been lying to me for months, and now you're trying to downplay it? How many more times do I have to hear you say it was an accident? How many more excuses?" "I didn't want to hurt you, I swear," she pleaded. "I never meant for it to go this far." I felt a pang of anger, a deep, guttural anger that bubbled up from somewhere inside of me. "But you did, Emily. You did hurt me. And you kept doing it." Her silence was deafening. It felt like she was struggling to find the words, but no matter what she said now, it wouldn't fix anything. She couldn't undo the damage. And I was starting to realize that no apology, no explanation, would make any difference. "You can't keep doing this," I said, my voice low but firm. "You can't keep pretending like this isn't real. I don't know if I can even look at you the same way anymore." "I'm sorry," she whispered, but there was no conviction behind it. It was just another empty word. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. This was it. This was the moment where I had to decide whether to keep fighting for something that was already dead or let go and move on. I didn't say another word before hanging up. And in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't doing this for Emily. I wasn't doing this to fix things. I was doing this for me. I needed to take control, to stop being the victim of this twisted situation. It was time to stop letting Emily's lies dictate my life. The hardest part was accepting that it was over. But somehow, even in the pain of it all, I could feel a sense of freedom beginning to grow. There was no going back now. After the call, I sat there for what felt like hours, not really doing anything, just absorbing the weight of what had just happened. The sense of finality in hanging up on her felt both liberating and devastating. It was clear that Emily and I were done, but what came next was still uncertain. I wasn't sure if I was relieved or just completely exhausted from the emotional chaos. The room felt quieter now, and I realized how long I'd been holding my breath, waiting for something, anything, to give me a sign, an answer. I had spent so much time trying to make sense of her actions, trying to find some piece of her that still cared about me. But the truth was, I had already known all along that things weren't right. The late nights, the distance, the lies. I just hadn't wanted to admit it. I got up and walked around the apartment, not really sure what I was looking for. Maybe some kind of closure, something tangible to remind me of who I used to be before all of this took over my life. But all I could see were the reminders of my past with Emily, the photos, the gifts, the trinkets scattered around. It was a gallery of a life that no longer existed. I thought back to the first time I met Emily. She was vibrant, full of energy, and everything I thought I wanted in a partner. The laughter, the chemistry, the dreams we shared of the future. How quickly it all unraveled. The moment I found out about the affair felt like it happened in slow motion. The betrayal didn't hit me all at once. It was like a drip, drip, drip of hurt, each new discovery adding another layer of doubt. But at the same time, I realized something crucial: I couldn't keep letting my life be defined by her actions. The fact that she had chosen to lie to me, to cheat on me, to use our marriage like it was something disposable, it was all too much. But it wasn't my fault. And that was the most important lesson I had to take away from all of this. It wasn't my fault that she made those choices. It wasn't my fault that she hurt me. I wasn't responsible for her decisions. As the day wore on, I thought about the future. About what I wanted out of life moving forward. It was clear that Emily had never been part of the picture I'd imagined. There was no going back to the life we had built together, no fixing what was broken. I had to face the truth: she wasn't the person I thought she was. And that was the hardest thing to swallow. But that wasn't the end of the story for me. I wasn't going to let this define me forever. I had spent too much time letting Emily's lies cloud my judgment, my happiness, my sense of self. It was time for me to rebuild. I thought about what I wanted in the future. A fresh start. A clean slate. I wasn't sure what that looked like yet, but I knew it was out there. I couldn't just throw away everything I had learned from this experience. The pain, the heartbreak, the anger, it would eventually fade. But the strength I was beginning to feel, the clarity, the sense of moving forward, that was something I could hold on to. I opened my phone again, checking my messages. Sarah had finally responded. Her message was brief, but it was clear she understood what I was going through. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a solution. But it was a sign that someone out there cared. And right now, that was all I needed. I took a deep breath and set the phone down. I wasn't sure what my future looked like yet. Maybe it would be full of new challenges, or maybe it would be a quiet journey of healing. But I wasn't afraid of it anymore. The worst had already happened. I had already lived through the nightmare. Now, I was finally waking up from it. And when I looked in the mirror that evening, I saw someone who was ready to rebuild, not for Emily, not for anyone else, but for myself. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I also knew it would be mine to walk. If I could give any advice to anyone in a similar situation, it would be this: don't let someone else's actions destroy your sense of self. It's hard. It's painful. But you have the power to move on. You have the strength to rebuild, to learn, and to grow from the hurt. Don't let the lies define you. And when you're ready, take that first step toward your own future, no matter how uncertain it may seem. The past doesn't have to control you. It only shapes you if you let it.